Hello everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, How Cardknox Migrated 1 million plus sensitive records to AWS. My name is Jim Huang, an AWS Partner Solutions Architect. I will be your speaker and moderator for today's webinar. Together with me are two co-presenters, Steve Ziegler, VP of Product Marketing, Logicworks, Bruce Zodwitz, CMO, Cardknox. And now I'm to present to you how AWS enables business transformation with cloud migration methodology, process, and tools. I will also describe AWS partner resources like Logicworks to help our customers like Cardknox to realize the business transformation. So from these slides, we can see a number of different business drivers for companies such as yours seeking to migrate to the cloud. First, a key driver is business agility. Some of our customers are creating business cases where their workforce can be 30 to 70% more productive, deliver features much faster as a result of migrating their skills and applications to the cloud. Second, we see a lot of data center consolidation projects, especially in companies that have been active with acquisitions or that experienced infrastructure sprawl over the years. We also increasingly see companies looking to completely revamp their business using modern technology as part of larger digital transformation projects and innovation. And of course, any cost-conscious organization is always looking for ways to improve the bottom line by reducing their cost. Here we talk about the potential barriers to cloud adoption. Well, we have motivators, as we just described, to migrate to the cloud, and we can find some challenges that some of you may observe when working in a migration project. For example, an organization may not have cloud expertise, and also identifying application interdependencies may take time. From the cost perspective, there are already existing investment. Now, cloud transformation require upfront expenses. And there are other potential barriers, such as concerns of business downtime during this migration. To address the potential challenges or concerns about cloud migration, as we just talked about, AWS has developed a cloud adoption framework and cloud migration methodologies and processes based on its years of experience in supporting customers' cloud transformation. So these slides highlight the core components of the AWS migration methodology and the process. First of all, you need to define business drivers, as we just briefly described above, and develop a compelling investment justification from the total cost of ownership perspective. The second core component here is about people and organization. This is important because the cloud transformation fundamentally changes the way organizations operate and people work. So you need to identify new roles and responsibilities during and after cloud transformation, after cloud migration. Consider who in your workforce will take on to identify the roles and plan how the workforce will be trained for or adapt to the cloud transformation. The methodical migration process is the third component here. We highly recommend using AWS multi-phased migration process to visualize and plan cloud adoption, from business planning, portfolio evaluation, to application design, migration execution, to cloud operations. The fourth component here is the set of 6 common migration strategies. To migrate applications, you need to first determine their migration-based strategy, a scheme based on the business objectives and application constraints. For example, you take a refactoring strategy if you want to leverage the cloud native services, or a customer may do lift and shift first, right, to meet the schedule or application or business constraints, then optimize the cloud deployment for higher performance or cost reduction. So in the following, I'm to present to you each of the four components in some details. Here's about building a business case for AWS migration. So when it comes to the business case, it's important to consider the following elements. First of all, is cost analysis. Existing environment and future state costs should be compared with a financial model. We often call it total cost of ownership model. Using this total cost of ownership model, you demonstrate the financial benefits of moving to the cloud. You will hear more about the TCO, or total cost of ownership calculation analysis in this seminar. Costs of change include costs of migration planning work and maintaining legacy environment as well until the migration is complete. Cloud has many benefits, and one of them is the increased productivity. As described earlier, automation is a key to higher productivity. So the cloud, the environment, needs to be automated. There's also a good business motivation for faster product deployment time to go to market quicker. After all, it's important to estimate the ROI to justify the overall business value from the migration. Now let's talk about people and organization, right? This is the second component. First of all, we recommend establishing a cloud center of excellence with a team of people responsible for building the best practices, governance standards, and frameworks that the rest of the organization will follow or leverage. This team will also develop subject matter expertise as the migration effort evolves. Here, leadership's commitment is a key. You need the leadership team's engagement throughout the migration project to remove obstacles and ensure the project success. We just talked about the first two core components, building a business case and forming a cloud center of excellence. Now let's look at migration methodology. As mentioned, AWS migration methodology is established, refined based on years of AWS experience in planning and executing customer migration projects. Today, this migration methodology is widely used by AWS migration specialists and AWS migration partners. And this methodology is comprised of 5 phases. The first phase is migration preparation and business planning. Here, you take business objectives into account, along with the architecture and constraints of your existing applications. And this early phase requires engaged leadership, frequent communication, and clarity of purpose. And for an entire organization to rally behind the decision to migrate, you need to set realistic goals and timelines. The second phase is portfolio discovery and planning, where you conduct full portfolio analysis, detailed analysis of your environment or IT assets, complete a map of dependencies among the applications, the infrastructure components, and then determine the migration strategy for applications and set up the priority for the candidate applications. For example, for PCI compliance, you need to find out which applications needs to meet the compliance standards, where does sensitive data reside, and what security tools are currently used today, so that you can better prepare for the target environment migration. To create a sound learning opportunity or gain experience for your migration teams, you began the migration process with less critical or less complex applications in your portfolio you uncovered. For example, you implement initial AWS environment with multi-account structure, security logging, shared services, and then deploy test a few non-critical applications in the environment. And again, this happens during the planning. It's not in the migration phase yet. So after the discovery and planning phase, you come to the iterative process of application design and migration and validation phases. Because each application has its own requirements and characteristics, the migration design and move shall be conducted on a per application basis. We recommend a continuous improvement approach because the level of project dynamics and success comes down to how well you apply the iterative approach in these phases. The last phase is about operating and optimizing the cloud environment and the migrated applications. You want to have a cloud operating model that is an evergreen set of people, processes, and technologies. And this constantly improves as you migrate more applications, optimize your new foundation, turn off old systems, and constantly iterate. Building off the expertise developed from the previous migration of application enables you to develop a foundation that leads to a continuously improving operating model. This is the last step. Now, move on to the last major components, 6 common migration strategies. When you design your application migration strategy, each application may have different requirements, as we described earlier. And it's very important to clarify the application strategy for each of the applications using one of these 6 migration patterns, or also called strategies. Rehost is also called lift and shift. It moves workload as is to the cloud with minimal changes. Examples include server running packaged software applications. Customers use lift and shift to quickly migrate, then focus on optimization. And you can automate much of this migration using AWS tools or the third-party vendor products with those migration capabilities. Replatform is like changing airplane engine for higher performance or newer functionality without changing the core application architecture. For example, you may implement a SQL database, migrate it to AWS Aurora database to reduce the amount of time spent on managing the database instances, but letting AWS to provide managed services for this database. Repurchasing refers to moving applications to a newer version or different solution. That likely means your organization is willing to change the existing licensing model. It is worth considering for workloads that can be easily upgraded to newer versions. Refactoring is driven by a strong business needs to add new features, scaling, or improve performance that would otherwise be difficult to achieve in the application's existing environment. One example of refactoring is changing the virtual machine to container, right, for microservices, so you can automate, expedite your application deployment. Refactoring entails overhauling legacy applications for optimization. It's often a trade-off decision between leveraging cloud-native services and the speed and the cost of migration. Right? It's a trade-off decision. Regarding the retaining strategy, you only migrate what makes sense for the business. If there are portions of your IT portfolio you are not ready to migrate, then you retain them in the existing data centers. If your workloads require hybrid environment between your data centers and AWS cloud, AWS has tools to support that, such as Direct Connect, Storage Gateway, Snowball, or even Snowmobile. Partners may also provide tools like Red Hat OpenShift, right, to bridge between the two environments, like the private cloud, public cloud, or the data center and AWS cloud. The last one is retire. With this strategy, you identify and retire IT assets that are no longer useful and can be turned off. So that way you remove waste spending and you can focus on resources in need. This is about the common migration strategies. Sometimes people also call this 6 patterns. So migration, as we just went through with this overview, it can be complex, but AWS can assist you in different ways. First of all, APN partners like Logicworks are experienced in migration projects. They can help out customers. Second, AWS Professional Services offers migration practice support in collaboration with partners. And third, the AWS Marketplace offers a collection of third-party tools specialized in migration to AWS. That covers the discovery, workload mobility, and post-migration optimization tasks. So please, look at the AWS Marketplace and leveraging those tools as much as you can or you like. AWS also provides migration native tools such as AWS Server Migration Service, Database Migration Service, Schema Conversion Tools, Migration Hub, and Snowmobile and Snowball, as I mentioned earlier. By leveraging these resources, now you can determine your migration business case, create a clear roadmap to achieve your desired end state in the cloud, and plan the entire migration effort and timeline, right, to reduce cost and risk. And here, a key is to keep your workforce focused on business innovation and change management once you finished migration. So I just went through an overview of AWS cloud migration methodology. Now I hand over the presentation to Bruce Zutowicz, CMO, Cardknox. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim, for that. Hello, everybody. My name is Bruce Zutowicz. I'm the CMO at Cardknox. And I'm going to walk you through a little today, our experiences migrating over to AWS and our success with that. So I'll first tell you a little bit about who Cardknox is. We're essentially a payment gateway, which means that we sit in between software solutions, whether a point-of-sale system, a website, a mobile application that's processing payment transactions. So we facilitate those payments, and they flow through our software, and we connect those transactions and process them through the processing banks. So if you can imagine that a IT division in the company is dealing with their own transactions, we're at any given time dealing with transactions from multiple companies that we're serving, thousands of companies that are sending their transactions through our software. So we're a developer-friendly, omni-channel secure payment gateway, which means that we support multiple channels, in-store, mobile, online, self-service models, and we are focused on developers to help developers work with our solutions, with APIs and SDKs that we help them integrate with our solutions. They could then we can facilitate the transactions to flow through us. So we create innovative solutions for complex payment challenges, and we have partners that partner with us, and we customize our solutions to fit their needs. So we have our technology that we optimize transactions for lower rates. We have some very clever technology that allows us to lower rates by analyzing the transactions and seeing perhaps which processor to send it to, or many other case studies. We easily integrate with POS and online software. So again, we're now supporting multiple businesses at any given time. Our uptime is extremely important. We're also a leader in chip card integration. So in the US, in 2016, they migrated over to a model to require chip cards to be processed in store. We certified for that, and then we go and enable our processing partners to leverage our certifications to accept chip cards at thousands of merchants. And we serve thousands of customers across every major industry throughout the United States, UK, and Canada. So I'm going to talk a little bit in this segment, one, our technology goals and how it applies to our migration to AWS or to a cloud platform, why we chose AWS from the multiple solutions that we looked at. I'll give you a little peek into what our AWS migration process looked like. Some exciting new AWS services that we've jumped onto that weren't part of the initial plan were introduced, and how we were able to go and be flexible to go and jump on and use those services. And then we'll end off with some of the results of the project and some of the successes that we had. So some of our technology challenges. So we had a huge influx of growth. We have had partners, some of our partners could have hundreds or thousands of merchants that they support. And when they integrate with us, we start having to support the millions of transactions that are then flowing through our system. And as we add partners and merchants, our IT stack and requirements grow. We were on a legacy hosting environment. And as I'm sure many of you on the call here today know, legacy hosting environments are not really suitable for an agile approach. We wanted to make sure that as we add on customers, we're able to scale properly to support all the transactions. So there were constraints in our scaling, and it was causing us to actually grow, which is a position that no company wants to be in. Then, of course, we have the balancing available across regions. We wanted to, especially with payments, it becomes mission critical, and we wanted to make sure we're able to balance across multiple regions to be able to support merchants across all the regions that we service. And lastly, our team was spending way too much time on server maintenance. Our development team primarily was there to build new products and services and solutions for our partners and customers, and in turn, they were spending too much time on the maintenance of servers. So our technology goals was first and foremost to support our business growth. We wanted to focus on development and not have to focus on the maintaining systems. Automation became a key. A lot of manual process was involved, whether it was in scaling or maintaining or patching servers. And automation was extremely, extremely important to us, that we could go and automate the process along all aspects of our IT stack. And lastly, something that was really important to us was PCI compliance. PCI is a payment card industry compliance. Any part of a transaction is required to be PCI compliant. So if we're not PCI compliant, in turn, it affects our partners and our customers. So part of our goals was to ensure that not only that our technology worked quick and fast, but it also was compliant with the PCI standards. So we've looked into multiple cloud solutions. We've dabbled with a few of them. Ultimately, we decided to migrate to AWS. We found AWS to be best in class for scalability, the redundancy, automation. We also were very comfortable that AWS had a large amount of customers that were actually using the platform for a while, which we found rare with some of the other cloud platforms. We also wanted to use as many fully managed solutions as possible. And this is something that was really key to us. We didn't want, Jim described a little bit about the different migration methods. And what we didn't want to do was really just lift and shift and just take our existing technology and move it over. We kind of really wanted to reinvent how we look at our systems, how we look at our databases, how we look at scalability in general, and how we can utilize the cloud benefits to our advantage, as opposed to really just going and taking our existing infrastructure and moving over to the cloud. And then together with that was choosing a partner that will help us with the migration and hold our hand during the migration process and ongoing as well. So we'll talk about a little bit about that as well. So our migration process, we follow the guidelines that we've given over by AWS as best practice and Logicworks. And the first thing we did was our migration preparation and business planning. First of all, we had to get all our decision makers on board, the key decision makers on board to agree to make that move to the cloud. We did a little internal testing and proof of concept on that. We also had to do a portfolio discovery and planning. We had to really make sure that we take stock of all the software that we're using, whether it's licensed software, servers, and databases, and really create a plan, because the more you plan, the easier that migration is going to be. The next step we moved on to is migration and validation. We took certain systems, created test environments, and we validated that it worked. We went back to our decision makers, showed them the success that we've had with that, and then it came to going and doing the application design. So the biggest challenge, really is getting an internal team who may not be familiar with the cloud, getting them up to speed, and really getting training in place to get them to understand the difference in architecture and how that works. And finally moved over to the operating stage, where we were able to go and actually launch and start processing live on AWS. So primarily, the primary solution that's been very beneficial to us was Amazon Aurora. And the biggest benefits to us for the platform as a service was there was really nothing to set up or configure. Obviously, there's initial settings to get it up, but once your settings are configured, scaling within there is set up. There's nothing more to set up as you want to grow. AWS takes care of scaling and high availability. And I think the way to look at this is that in the past, we would have our servers, we would have, what the industry calls our cows, and there were workhorses to go and carry out the processes that we had to get done. Well, we were emotionally attached to them, and we knew the capabilities of each one, and we had our servers, and we would nurture them and grow them, and if one died, we were emotionally attached to it, and we had to rebuild that server. We've went to the mentality of having cattle, where now we don't look at servers as servers or databases as databases. We look at them as a cattle, and what we're getting to is a herd, where we simply don't look at the individual resources, individual servers. We have now capability to go throw processes at a database, and they instantly scale and grow without having to think of it individually. I think it's really key to have the mentality shifts when you're going to the cloud, is you're not looking at individual servers and resources. You're actually looking at just a magic system that you throw challenges at it, and it gets it done. One-click patching. Patching is something that we all know could take hours, days, or much longer. And as patching requirements have to be done continuously, they become more of a challenge. With AWS, we literally have one-click patching to patch any of these resources. Automated backups. Automated backups, I think many companies have backups, and they have drills and whatnot. But when you really have a backup that works well within a cloud system, that really means that if your system goes down, you can restore a backup, get up and running, literally with a few clicks. One of our DevOps was working at a company with a legacy system. They had their backups, they had everything in place, but when they did have a server failure, it took 8 hours to get their systems back up. With AWS, an environment could be back up and running within a few minutes, or even sooner. And lastly, we had higher throughput than our previous database setup, and AWS actually is costing us less than it did with our legacy hosting environment. We have predictable costs. Our scalability is predictable. We also don't have to go and do major investments to anticipate growth. Back in the day, a company is doing a Super Bowl commercials, they would have to make sure to ramp up their servers with a tremendous amount of investment to anticipate any growth. With us, automatic scale with charge based on the resources used, we don't have any outlay of investment for that. So some of the exciting new Amazon Aurora developments that we've benefited from is Amazon Aurora Multi-Master. Just to give you a little peek into some of the things that we've found extremely beneficial. In most environments, you could have a master and your slave, and they can only have one read, right? We could have multiple read and writes. So it essentially means we could replicate our system many times over, have many reads and writes. One fails instantly, the other one takes over. It really improves our already high availability. We're able to increase that tenfold. One of your master instance fails, the other one instance are designed to take over immediately. And together with the scripts, and we'll talk about it a little more with our partnership with Logicworks, allows us that if anything should fail, instantly there's one ready to go, literally without missing a beat. Amazon Aurora Serverless. Over here, we don't have to look again at as a resource in and of itself. Serverless means that we just pay for database resources, and whatever we throw it at, we just get charged by the resources used, and we're charged on a second-by-second basis, which became very cost-efficient for us. We can scale in seconds. Any time that we have to add, if we're having a tremendous amount of growth, it just automatically scales, and it really was perfect for us for a variety of application loads. When server traffic and processing goes up or down, it automatically scales appropriately for that. So right now, our testing environment was such that we have now a separate VPCs. So we have a separate clouds for our dev, stage, production environments. AWS Code Deploy is a method which promotes the code to production. So what we'll have right now is we'll have our dev, stage, and production environments. We could literally take a dev and on a schedule, move that to stage, do our extensive testing on that, and we could go and move that production with literally a few clicks, something that no legacy system can do or could even dream of doing. So we had our improved deployment velocity. Really important was no one touches the production environment. Our production environment is automated. It's easy for our multiple users to test simultaneously because we have the separate VPCs, and rollback is really a few clicks. You know, as you may have experience with systems, when you try to roll back, the rollback doesn't work easily. So the rollback on AWS was found to be extremely beneficial to us. So I want to talk a little bit about why we chose Logicworks as a partner to help us with our migration and our ongoing needs on AWS. So we found their deep AWS knowledge, their security expertise. We have a team that we work with. Our internal team works together with Logicworks. We found Logicworks also to be very beneficial in that even if there's a new technology that is released, they don't necessarily jump on it until they're comfortable and they know that it's going to really work for our needs, which is very important in the cloud because sometimes you can try to test new technology before your company's ready for it. They really help us to make sure that the resources that are available are used properly for our environment. They have automation services, and this is really key for us, that they have automation script. They built an AWS environments from the ground up. They have scripts that are ready to go for us. Anything from setting up servers to helping with the scalability of it, or any of the code deployment that we'll have for that. 24/7, 365 support, which is expected, but is something that we've really come to use and which is something that's really important to us. They've helped us with our PCI requirements in AWS, and for us, as I mentioned, was extremely important to be able to deploy on AWS and be PCI compliant. And their scripts allowed us to deploy in AWS with literally a click of a button. So a lot of the automation that's available to AWS that we would have to go on our own, they were able to supply that with one click. And currently we're using them ongoing for the ongoing support. Our needs change. Our needs constantly change. So it's really important for us to know that we have a knowledge expert that's there to help us, along with our growth. So the results of the project, I will tell you an interesting insight that we had during the migration process. It came to a point that we were in the middle of the migration. We were moving over segments of our environment over to AWS while keeping our legacy in place. And we had a failure on our legacy environment. And it was at that point we made the decision it was actually quicker to go and fast track our deployment to AWS than try to work out the legacy failure and try to fix that. And another time we were about 80% on AWS and 20% on legacy, and there was a system failure. And some people said, "Oh, you see, AWS." It turns out that the failure was on our legacy system. AWS, has run smoothly, and the point of failure was there. So it really reinforced the confidence in moving over to a platform that is there. So we experienced faster deployment. We had 6 times higher database performance when we've moved over to AWS. We have a much more secure and streamlined CI/CD pipeline. So it helps us reduce manually IT maintenance, and our developers really now are able to focus on development. We have a very small DevOps team that is really primarily used to act as an in-house liaison with Logicworks to help us with the systems. But our developers now primarily, we've reached a goal that the developers are now working on actually developing solutions as opposed to maintaining systems. And with PCI compliance in AWS, we're actually live in AWS. I would estimate about 90 to 95% of our systems are live in AWS. The remaining 5%, for whatever reason, for licensing reasons, for other reasons that we still have to migrate, but primarily our systems are now running successfully on AWS, and we've had a lot of success with that. So thank you all for joining. I'm going to hand it over now to Steve Zeller, VP of Product at Logicworks.
Thanks so much, Bruce, and thank you, Jim, and thanks for everybody who's out there. Hope you're still listening. We've helped hundreds of companies get to the cloud at Logicworks, but Cardknox is just a great story. They've really been innovators in credit card chip technology, mobile payments, point of sale, and it's just been a great company to work with as well. And we do have a really cool case study on our site as well, logicworks.com, if you want to read more from a business perspective. So I'm going to keep this to about 10 minutes. I see we have some great questions queued up here, so I want to make sure that we have time for that. But I did want to give you the background on Logicworks. So we're an AWS Premier Partner. We're one of the few partners that has competencies across migration, DevOps, security, and managed services. We're also a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. Thank you, Gartner, for public cloud service providers. And we specialize in software delivery for compliant workloads, typically in healthcare and financial services. And we help people wherever they are in this journey of moving to the cloud. So folks that are trying to come up with a business plan and a cloud strategy. Jim mentioned total cost of ownership. We have a practice around that. Folks that need help with day-to-day management and efficiency in the cloud. So this is responding to availability alerts, security alerts, cost efficiency data that's coming out of cloud and third-party tools, and how to act on that and manage that on a day-to-day basis. We have a very, very heavy focus on DevOps and cloud automation, as Bruce mentioned, so we help people to set up CI/CD and configuration management, infrastructure automation, DevSecOps, and all this wrapped in cloud security. We build in cloud security from the ground up, and that's always been a big focus of ours. So obviously, it's important for us to comply with all of the general standards out there. We just gained our official High Trust certification last month, which is very exciting. High Trust has become the go-to standard to sort of encapsulate a lot of the common regulatory frameworks like NIST and HIPAA and PCI as well. And we also roll that into a SOC 2 audit that's available for our overall sort of documentation of compliance. So I'm just going to go through the same story from our point of view. We're the folks who had engineers working with both Cardknox's development team as well as AWS's infrastructure team to make sure this project was a success. Go through the compliance process, talk a little bit about the key points of PCI that we integrate into our process, and then how we automate them. So we talked about these 4 steps. I think Jim did a really nice job outlining them. When we walk into an opportunity, what we first try to help people come up with an overall strategy. Which applications do they focus on? How do these applications contain and treat sensitive data, in this case, transactional financial data like credit card transactions? Which security tools is a company using? Are there any gaps in that process? And understanding that shared responsibility model of what AWS is responsible for, how Logicworks is going to help with data management, take responsibility, and what is still going to be in the purview of the client. So just diving into that a little more, right? AWS provides an amazing infrastructure foundation. So they're taking responsible for all of the physical components, global network of locations and data centers, all of the platforms like networking platforms, databases, storage, compute, all of these tools. When it comes to how to use and configure these tools, that's where the shared responsibility model comes in. So as an AWS user, you're responsible for getting to the cloud, so designing architecture, migrating, building, certifying yourself. You're responsible for these day-to-day management tasks like monitoring, DevOps, your budget, and then the security pieces, like there's a bunch of AWS native security pieces like encryption and key management and identity management and access, but you're still responsible for configuring them. And then there's the regulatory piece, PCI DSS in this case, and then the day-to-day management of the security tools that you've put in place. And all that stuff you see in the middle is before you get to the proprietary customer Cardknox's data and applications. So this is where Logicworks fits in. We have services that take care of this middle tier so that, as Bruce mentioned, our customers can focus on their core business goal, which is to support their customers and develop products and features for their software. We can take care of the adoption of designing and helping people to migrate their applications to the cloud, the day-to-day monitoring and management of it, and the security tools and the management of those tools on a day-to-day basis. I'm not going to dive into this. If you're interested in talking to us about specific architecture questions, please reach out. But there is a fairly sophisticated security architecture required for PCI. And the way we approach it generally is to do what we call a hub and spoke model. So we try to create a central sort of minimum viable cloud hub that contains all of the administrative security and DevOps features that are table stakes for doing PCI work in the cloud. So this middle piece there you see where it says management VPC, that's sort of the table stakes secure baseline for PCI build. This is obviously oversimplified, that Logicworks builds. And then from there, we build out the spokes, which is what Bruce was talking about when he mentioned the development, staging, production, and DR environments. And then there can be spokes for different lines of business for certain customers, for different iterations of applications, et cetera. So this gives us, it really fills 2 roles. It's an economic benefit because you don't have to start duplicating administrative and security tools in each VPC you build for a different line of business or a different layer. And also it helps us to manage and make sure that everything is tightly controlled in one central place when it comes to security. We design this according to this multi-reg framework. This is actually something that came out of Amazon, and it's a really smart approach basically you can take any combination of regulatory standards like NIST or PCI or FedRAMP or HIPAA or HITRUST, and then those all have different combinations of groups of technical controls, and you'll see those listed on the left here. It's a little small, but if you're interested in this, feel free to reach out to us for more detail. But basically, you can translate these regulatory standards into specific technology requirements, and then you can map them all together into groups of practical sort of logistic requirements that can be built into a system. So you don't have to build something and then say, oh wait, we have to be HIPAA compliant. Let's go through all of those requirements. And then, oh yeah, let's start our PCI work and then go through all of those in a different order, etc. You can group everything together, centralize all the different technology requirements, and start from this comprehensive multi-reg framework. And again, I think that Bruce really illuminated the benefits of an automated approach. For us, frankly, this is how we've been successful as a business. If we went manually and started to configure each instance that we spun up for a client on AWS, that would be completely ineffectual. So we very much stress automation in every phase of what we do. It helps eliminate error, it helps security, it helps efficiency, it helps time to market, and it's more economical. So it's a win-win. It does require some work and some know-how building out an automated dynamic environment, but once you do it, that's really the only way you can leverage the real benefits of the cloud. Specifically for compliance, trying to manage old school approaches to security tools in the cloud can be very difficult. So if you have a software that's doing intrusion detection, for example, and that piece of software does not understand that it is now monitoring a dynamic auto-scaling group of servers that are going to spin up and spin down, that tool is not going to work well. So we build our tools to understand dynamic environments so that they're automatically booted up with the spin up of a new server. The information from them is automatically aggregated across our systems, and they're very aware of this new reality that Bruce mentioned, where they have whole herds of servers that are gaining and decreasing in number depending on the requirements. And then this is example of the Cardknox example of this. So layering the appropriate raw AWS services with best practice architectures and secure designs, creating a whole template structure, and then going down to the OS level and using a hardened OS to build security in through the entire pipeline. And just a little more detail on that. But we've built in a whole pile of security tooling, too much detail to talk about today. That all goes into their instance build process, testing and validation. As much as possible, as Bruce mentioned, we're using Amazon PaaS services, automating the reporting of those, building out that blue-green pipeline. And then Logicworks has a bunch of scanners, both home-built and using third-party tools, to make sure that we're enforcing all that on a day-to-day basis, so that any changes that are being made to the configuration through that shared responsibility model are carrying forward all the good work that we've done in security and design. And I think, again, Bruce did a really nice job of this, but we try to help people through the entire spectrum of those services, and then continue to improve this moving forward through both automation and engineering reviews to make sure that we're taking advantage of all the best new features and continuing to make sure that Cardknox has the best possible performance and security and ROI on the whole project as they continue to grow. So at the end of the day, I love talking about the Cardknox story because it's just a very cool company, and they're able to provide an application in a really exciting space. And so I'd like to take pride that we've helped them to make this move, which has saved them money, it's increased security, it's improved their efficiency, and it's given them a process on which they can continue to grow and lead the field of payments and payment gateway industry. And obviously, AWS has been a totally instrumental partner. Logicworks has played our part, and the three of us together, I think, have really achieved a wonderful story. I want to take some questions, so I think I'm going to pass it back to Jim, who's going to moderate our last 10 minutes or so here while we answer some questions.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Yeah, we are now going to the transition into our Q&A session. I saw that's quite some questions, interesting questions. Let me start with one. I think this is for Cardknox. What went wrong during migration that other companies can learn from? Bruce, can you answer this question, please?
Sure, Jim. Yeah, so that is a really great question. You always plan and you want everything to go smoothly. The issue that we had when we were migrating, what I would say went wrong wasn't really going live. It was more in the process of migrating our internal team to be more effective on the cloud. For example, nuance differences in queries, making sure that our systems, our code worked well. Also in terms of our internal team getting up to speed on AWS, we have constant trainings for that, and we had to change responsibility roles where people in the past may have been able to publish code where they may not be AWS experts internally. We had to change some of that roles. So those are things to look into. I will say that we didn't have any issues actually migrating when we went live. Our systems remained up. It was really more in the planning stages.
Thanks, Bruce. Let's move on to the next question. What's the biggest challenge for companies with compliance standards when migrating to AWS? Steve, answer this question.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jim. Yeah, it's a great question. It really is. I think from the graphics we've presented, it seems pretty simple, but AWS really is a fundamentally different platform than a legacy data center. In a legacy data center, all of your equipment is physically located behind a set of switches and firewalls that are under your control. And so there's a lot less requirement for security moving between instances, between layers of the application, for example, between the web servers and the database, between the application servers. That is often an area that is overlooked. And then when people lift and shift a legacy application to Amazon, they suddenly realize that in the cloud, every hop needs to be protected. You need to be using HTTPS connections. You need to be using encryption really at every level of the application. So that's a common pitfall. The other one is you need to know which services are acceptable for which compliance standard. So, Amazon moves extremely quickly and brings a lot of incredible products to market. And there is a process that those products go through. So there's usually a beta, and then they're available within one region. And then there'll be a few steps that happen before they're covered under the main audit structure and become eligible for this type of compliant work. So those are two areas that we focus on. There's a lot of methodology around compliant migrations, but I'd say those are two key areas that we often see as kind of red flags for people that just dive in and start doing it for the first time themselves.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Next question. This one consists of two parts. Probably the partner can answer one, the customer side can answer one. The question is, what was the volume of data migrated? What AWS tool was used to migrate from on-prem to AWS? For the first part, what was the volume of data migrated? Perhaps Bruce, you can answer.
Yeah, I can answer that vaguely for security reasons, but we have many millions of records that we've migrated over successfully, and we continue to increase that on the AWS cloud.
Yeah, thanks. Regarding the tools, Steve, can you comment on that?
Yeah, there's not enough time to actually break down Cardknox's migration, but I will say that in general, we will sometimes use automated tools on an instance basis. We see Cloud Indoor as one of the leaders in that space, so they're able to do block level replication of instances from legacy environments or like Windows and VMware, lift and shift those servers to Amazon, and then we're able to layer on our DevOps tools and monitoring and managed services on top of that. Amazon also, we use a lot of native tools when it comes to database migration. So Amazon has database data and database query level replication tools that we can use, and that can be cross-version and cross-platform. So we'll leverage that. And then we also just use native tools if we're going like to like. So we will use file system replication. We'll use database replication so that we can take a best snapshot of this, do a bunch of configuration work, and then sort of refresh right before we flip the switch on DNS to actually do a migration, so that we're sort of, have the minimum data loss when it comes to actually moving over to the new live environment.
Thanks, Steve. That's a lot more questions now. Next one, were there any challenges regarding application interdependencies? And did the team follow agile method as well? And did performance improve once on AWS, once you move on to AWS? That's quite a few in this one question. So Steve, you may.
I could take that one. Thanks, Jim. So there's always challenges, and as I mentioned, actually, so that's an interesting question because I had picked out application interdependencies as one of the common pitfalls. So that's something that we focus on very, very specifically in the planning stage, right? We need to catalog and inventory all the applications. What are their interdependencies? What are their connections between each other, both logical and networking? And yes, we definitely follow the agile method. So what we will usually do is we will come up with a foundation build, which is similar to a single iteration of the VPC that I briefly showed you in the application architecture slide. That way, the client, in this case Cardknox, has a foundational build on which to start kicking the tires and installing applications and testing, while we start to build out additional layers. So we'll be building. We'll turn over development, for example. We'll start building out production and DR from a CloudFormation infrastructure level, while they start doing their application testing. It speeds up the process a lot. And yes, performance definitely improved, but also it had to be tuned, right? So getting them to Aurora. Bruce mentioned there's an automatic sort of 6-point redundancy, and they can use those 5 clones for read instances and that sort of thing. That helped a lot, and the overall flexibility of the system, as well as the automation and those blue-green deployments, that all speeds up time to market. It speeded up performance, and it improved the ROI. But of course, it doesn't happen magically. There's a lot of manual engineering work once we've used the automatic tools that goes into fine-tuning it. And of course, making sure that the application is tuned is something Bruce's team was responsible for, and that was all on them to, once we set up the infrastructure side, to fine tune all the application once it's running in the cloud. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. There are more questions, but it looks like we reached the top of the hour, and we are right now wrap up today's webinar. We want to thank you all very much for attending. If you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you.